Hello everyone and welcome back to Java. Today we're going to be talking about the ArrayList and array in Java, what they mean, how you use them, what they're good for, why use one instead of the other, the varying complexity levels and stuff. This is tutorial number 9. I'm the Best Mac Tutorials. Welcome back. Can't remember if I mentioned that or not, sorry. You're going to want to import java.util.wildcard. That is where the ArrayList class is stored. Arrays are more of a fundamental primitive part of Java that don't need to be imported. So, anyway. Arrays are simpler, and well, first of all, the inspiration for this tutorial was Sean Willis's question involving naming objects, and I thought one of two things from his question. I wasn't sure which one it was. One was a very simple topic, which is how to make an object and tell it, say it's a person object, hey person, you're Gene. And then later say, hey person object, what's your name? And the object will say, I'm Gene, or hi, I'm Gene, or whatever. And you can, pull and push data to it like that. And so I was thinking, oh yeah, all right, cool. Yeah, I'll do a tutorial on how to do that kind of naming. And then I thought, wait, the other thing I thought is, wait, maybe he means dynamic naming. And dynamic naming is not only a very advanced topic that I'm probably not really ever going to do. One, because it's highly advanced. 2, because there's really no use for it, and we will be doing quite advanced stuff. Probably by tutorial 15 we'll be into GUIs with buttons, with action listeners, mouse listeners, things that log keys. I'll do kind of a little show and tell of some things I've made probably in 2 or 3 tutorials when we start getting into GUI elements, as far as things that I've made that have very basic GUI elements to them. But so we will be getting into advanced topics, but this isn't really one I want to cover because, one, it's very advanced, especially for this stage in the tutorials. Maybe as we go further up into tutorial, 50, 60, 70, oop, hit my desk with my elbow, ow, we might be getting into things like, I tend to move my hand a lot while I'm talking. Maybe we'll be getting into advanced things like hash maps and whatnot, and hash maps is where we would be seeing dynamic naming of objects being a possibility. The second reason I wouldn't want to do it is because there's really no use for it that I can see that makes it any better than, or even as good as, using arrays. That's why I'm doing a tutorial on arrays here. The third reason is it's bad programming practice. There's really no legitimate reason I can think of that you would need dynamic naming instead of array lists and arrays. And honestly, it's a lot harder to keep track of dynamic naming. Some languages allow it. Like, for example, to give you an example of what dynamic naming means, if I had int a equals 4, basically dynamic naming would be that I don't put a there. I put a variable, say, and then I have a string str equals a. And then it would say int str equals 4. And as you can see, that obviously doesn't work. It says, wait, but str is already defined, and you're saying, well, I want the value of str for that, and Java doesn't work that way. Some other languages, I think you can do dynamic naming like that, but even in those, it's bad practice, and with the availability of arrays and array lists, there's really no reason to do that. So, if you were talking about just telling, the normal, hey, object, your name is Jode, and I've been reading Grapes of Wrath, and hey, object, what's your name, and it says, I'm Jode. If that's what you mean, leave a comment and I'll make tutorial 10 all about more advanced object instantiation, things like that. But in general, if you meant dynamic naming, this is the alternative you're looking for dynamic naming. Dynamic naming is bad, don't do that. If you're advanced enough to be using hash maps, you should not be using dynamic naming. Also, another kind of housekeeping type item, more housekeeping than the last one. The last one was like cleaning out your gutter. This one, that's outside the house. I've been kind of wondering what to do next as far as tutorials. I thought arrays and array lists, especially prompted by that question, made a lot of sense, but I'm starting to wonder if if there's things people are like, well, how do I do this, and why is he going into networking before he does this? And so let me know kind of what you guys want to see. I do plan to do some basic GUI elements. Don't plan to get too advanced into user interfaces. Plan to just kind of touch on them and then revisit them later once we've you kind of have to build it like a ladder. You have to, you don't want to just go full speed ahead into GUIs and everything and all advanced, and you've hardly even talked about action listeners, and you haven't really talked about formatting data properly and proper data storing techniques, encryption, things like that. You kind of want to build, so basic GUI elements and talk about this, and a little bit more advanced GUI and whatever, and so you kind of don't want to go way too advanced in one topic. Like, I wouldn't want to sit here and do a giant networking thing, and then you guys leave and you're like, oh man, I'm great at networking, I can encrypt data streams and I can do everything, and then someone's like, how do I generate a random number? And you're like, I don't know. You kind of want to have balance, so that's what I'm going to try to achieve. But we will be getting into some GUI elements, probably tutorials 11, 12, 13. I'll do a little show and tell for a project, a small little project I made that involves GUI buttons, action listeners, local machine code execution. That's like, calling something which in turn actually has a kernel built into it. I haven't built this yet. I've been working on this feature. It's basically, as you can see, I have Bitcoin here. It's a client for actually a PP coin, P squared coin. It's another alternate cryptocurrency. Not really too interested in getting too into that now. I'd love to, but this is Java, not that. But I'll be showing that off, showing how the GUI works, how buttons work, the logic behind it, all that kind of fun stuff. And I just got a Skype message, and I just got another one. So anyway, array lists and arrays, they're basically ways of organizing data, organizing objects. You can make an array of anything. An int, a double, a long, a string, a person object, any kind of objects you make, you can do arrays and array lists of, things like that. And so I'm going to be focusing on arrays more for numerical representations, ints, doubles, longs, that kind of stuff, and array lists more for objects. But you can use both for both. Let's get started real quick. Well, at first, what is an array? If you think of an array as a bunch of, like, just a continuous stream of data, you're looking at it wrong. You got to look at it kind of like, well, you don't have to, but this is the way I look at it, kind of jail cells, holding cells, pins, crates, whatever, all kind of lined up. Each crate has, I like the analogy crates, because imagine the same sized crate, I just made up that analogy and I like it, sorry. Imagine you have like 20 crates, they're all the exact same size, maybe they're 15 cubic feet, that's a fairly big crate, but anyway, you have, 10, 20, 15 cubic feet crates that you just have lined up in a row. They all have the same exact capacity, and they're all made to store hydrochloric acid. Why hydrochloric acid? Because it's cool. So you have like this giant unlimited supply of hydrochloric acid coming through a hose, and you have all your protective equipment on, and the crates are somehow lined in something that's resistant to hydrochloric acid, of course. And so as you walk by the crates, you fill each one to the brim, or you fill each one a certain amount. Some you fill a little bit, some you fill a lot, some you fill till they're almost about to spill, but all of them are still hydrochloric acid is all contained within the crate. And so when you instantiate your array, you tell it how many crates you want, and then you add the hydrochloric acid later. So I'm going to do a little bit more boring of an example than caustic hydrochloric acid here. Wouldn't want to make a mistake. So int array, my array equals new int array. Array sign is those brackets, and then you have to either put a number or assign it to a actual array of values. I'm going to create a number here, so I'm going to say 7. So what does that mean? It means this array, my array, has 7 crates. Each crate is exactly big enough to hold the largest integer possible. If I put double, they'd be way bigger crates. In memory. That is, in memory, it's reserving that in the JVM, Java Virtual Machine. It's responsible for allocating memory, and by default it has around half a gig to a gig of memory. So again, making tons of arrays of variables that are a lot bigger than you need. For example, if I was going to store a bunch of numbers from 1 to 10 but they had decimals, and I was going to do it in an array, I would not use a double. Normally, array double, no problem, memory can handle a lot of them. But if you're going to start making arrays of a bunch of objects, I wouldn't use doubles unless you really need that size. I'd use something else that has decimal support. So, that's another topic though. But be smart with your memory management with arrays, that is very important. So, this says I want 7 crates, and you cannot change that later. You could take all the things out of that array and put it into a new one, into a new line of crates that has more crates, but that's kind of a intensive procedure as far as on the CPU. Once you get into hundreds and hundreds of thousands of arrays, you don't want to be doing that every time you add something. So you want to make it big enough so that it can cover all the stuff you're going to add to it. Now, the way you add stuff to it, my array 1, actually they start at 0. This would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 would be the valid positions for one that goes up to 7. My array 0 equals 4. Again, remember 4.1 is going to give us an error because it's not an integer. That is, in fact, a decimal, not an integer. So my array 0 equals 4. My array 1 equals 7. My array 2 equals 8. So if we did this system.out.println my array 1, it would print out, you guessed it, 7. So let's just run this and show you if it will ever load. And as you can see, there's 7. It says 7. That's because we assigned 7. Now what if we do something, say we never assign spot 4. What do you think it's going to print out? 0. The thing is, arrays, when they are instantiated, if they're integer arrays, they're filled with a bunch of zeros. All the crates are filled with 0 hydrochloric acid, which you might say that's null, that's nothing. Actually, in like an integer array or something like that, it's not null, it is 0. There is a big difference between null and 0. Null is no value, 0 is no positive or negative. So there is a difference there. There is a discrepancy. If you have an integer and you set it equal to 0, and then you ask the computer if it's null, it'll say, no, it's not null, it has 0. You know, computers see a huge difference between those. We, on the other hand, are like 0, null, nada, zilch, whatever, it's nothing. So, interesting little tidbit to keep in mind. You can do this dynamically. You can do this like this. For int I equals 0, I is smaller than 7, I plus plus. My array I equals I times 3. And then why don't we do a system.out.println my array. Now, let's run this and see what happens. Oh, look, it printed out a bunch of, this is basically a memory pointer. We don't want that. That's because we printed out the array. What we need to do is we need to print out the array with the indice, or index. Indice is plural, index is singular, of what we want. So let's try that again. Suddenly you have 0, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, as predicted. You take 0 multiplied by 3, you get 0. Take 1 multiplied by 3, you get 3. I'm pretty sure I talked about for loops, but the way these work is they say, at the beginning they initialize an integer, in this case an integer, they call it I, or whatever name you want to use. I is the standard, and they set it equal to 0, or whatever number you want to start at. Then you say, while I is less than 7, or greater than whatever, or equal to whatnot, do this. And so it does everything in this block here, and then at the end it comes up here and says, what do I do? Oh, I add 1 to I, right? Increment I. So it increments I, so it's going like this. For int I equals 0, so it just said I equals 0. Then it says, is 0 less than 7? Yep. Alright, so let's run this. Alright, we're done. I equals 0. Oop, I equals 1. Bloop. Is 1 less than 7? Yup. Run. Bloop. 2. Is 2 less than 7? Etc. You can see how that goes. So that's a for loop. If we did less than or equal to 7, we'd get a null pointer exception, as I'll show you. Null pointer exception is, or an array index out of bounds exception, is an exception that, that's what I meant, not null pointer. That's something slightly different. Array index out of bounds exception means this index, it's calling 7. It only has 1 through 6 because it has 7 elements and it starts counting at 0. Therefore it's saying, hey, there's not just nothing here, there's no crate. You know, where's the crate? It's just a bunch of dusty floor with small splatterings of hydrochloric acid. What are you doing? Memory's a lot cleaner than that, but, you know, in some computers. So, you have to have this less than 7, or you could do less than or equal to 6, or whatever floats your boat there. You could also do I minus minus, and you'd see we'd hit the same issue. Also, we get a null pointer exception, or index out of bounds exception, -1. The hell are we doing with -1 in an array? You'll never have an array index that's less than 0. They don't go negative. They always count up. So, that's our basic example. Now, what about if we already have an array of data and we just want to populate an array and we don't want to have to do a for loop and everything? Well, we can use the array syntax of this for 8, 12, 16. Now, this says, Java says, alright, I see 4 elements here, so I'm going to, basically, the code that it's doing is this. Simplified, of course, it is a little bit different as far as what it's doing, because it is in bytecode, but equals, it's basically doing that, and of course it's going to give us an issue, and then it's saying this. That's basically, this is almost the same, although it can only be used as an initializer, of course, but this is basically the same as doing this, except the second one wasn't actually a valid code piece for you to type in. This has to be an initializer, not something that you set it to later. But anyway, this would say, alright, we need 4 crates. Fill first crate with 4, second crate with 8, the third crate with 12, and the fourth crate with 16. And so, another thing to point out here is if you don't use the full size of the integer, the crate still takes up that much space in the memory or in the room where you have all the hydrochloric acid and the hazmat suits. If you have this room and you have the crates, like I said, and you only fill a crate half full, that crate's still taking up, in that room, the total space that the crate takes up. It's not just taking up the size of the hydrochloric acid. Same is happening in memory. It reserved for integers, even though it's only storing very small values. It's ready to store 2.147 approximately billion plus negative or positive in each one of these, even though we're only storing 4, 8, 12, and 16. So there is definitely a couple memory issues there. If you're going to be using a lot, consider using something like a short for something like this. Consider using a short or one of the other similar data types like that. So, now that we have that settled, what if your program is, say, a networking program, and you have people that are constantly tapping in and adding information? So you're constantly having to update that array. You're constantly having to say, hey, new crate. And so you throw a crate to the guy in the hazmat suit, and he jumps because he wasn't expecting it, and it hits him, and it falls into miraculously the right place. Well, how would you do that with an array? Well, with this kind of array, what you'd have to do is you have to do another array, int my array 2 equals int array of 5 if we wanted to add 1 crate, and then we do for int I equals 0, I is smaller than 4, or we could ask this my array, how big are you? My array dot size I plus plus. Something interesting you'll note on size, and sorry, I've noticed I talk a little bit fast, but that's just me, I'm sorry. It doesn't have any parentheses. Not there. My array dot size, or actually, sorry, length, does actually not have parentheses. So, why does it not like int here? It's because we have to do this. We have to put new. So, sorry about that. But we have a new array, and it's 5 because this was 4. We could even say new int my array dot length plus 1. We could do this. Either one works. This one would work better if you were dynamically doing it. You didn't know how many were in this, so you had to ask it, find out, hey, how long are you? How many crates are in your little assembly line there filled with vats of hydrochloric acid, you know? So then you'd do a for loop, and you'd say my array 0, or my array 2 index 0 equals my, typing horribly today, my array 0, and then at the end, then you could do my array 4, remember, start counting at 0, equals 17. Or actually, let's go with the pattern 20. It's an arithmetic sequence. So, int my array equals 4, 8, 12, 16. Oh wait, we want to add 20 to that. You have to make a whole new array. Now, how do you solve this problem? How do you solve this dilemma if you're constantly going to be adding stuff to an array and you don't know when it's going to end? Well, you use an array list, and that's why we have java.util imported. What's an array list? Well, it's kind of like an array, but it has more really cool features. And of course, there are a lot more things to do with arrays and array lists that I'm not covering. These are the very bare basics, the very minimum that you need to be able to start working with them and to start utilizing them in a programming environment. There are tons more advanced things that we'll be covering in later episodes, probably up in the early 20s. We'll be going back to array lists. Hey guys, remember these? Well, look at all these cool things you can do with them. You know, but now it's just the simple stuff. So array list of type. Well, what type do you want? Let's do something like, since I don't have a custom object made right now, maybe I'll do that in tutorial 10, tie those in. Array list, let's do an integer again, equals new array list, integer, parentheses, because it is a class, it does need that empty constructor. And what's it mad about this? Variable declarator ID expected after this token. That means this. It means the name. It's their fancy way of saying name. Array list integer my array list. Like that. And it's going to yell at it, it's not used, remove it. No, I don't want to remove it. I'm going to use it now. So anyway, my array list. Now, instead of doing this, do you think that's going to work? Nope. This is an object, so you have to start thinking in objects. Objects generally follow, or actually always follow, this rule: myArrayList dot, and then the method. So if I have an object person with a method feed, I would do person dot feed and then 2 parentheses, and then if they needed any variables passed to it, when I run that method, I would put them in there. But I'm going to do this: myArrayList dot add. Oh, another thing to mention about arrays and array lists: you can overwrite any crate at any time. You can say, hey, vat number 2, you're supposed to have more hydrochloric acid and pour more in, or you're not supposed to have as much and suck some out. You can reassign a new variable to it at any time, any point in time. So just keep that in mind. You can rewrite over stuff. And actually, fun fact: a string is actually just an array of characters. So you learn something new, unless you already knew that, which props to you. So myArrayList.add 4. That adds it on to the end. Now, in the future, we'll be discussing how to add it to a certain index. How to say, hey, I want to put in 4, but I want to put it at position 0, and so I want to insert it, or I want to replace it, or we'll be talking about how to do some of the more advanced features. But as far as just populating it, that's all we're going to be talking about today. And the advantages of using an array list are: 1, you can expand them, you can keep adding to them in memory until you run out, of course. 2, you can there's more features. They have the collections.sort package can do some cool stuff with sorting array lists. So they're more versatile, and they're a little better memory management. The reason to use the other arrays: the biggest one is they're simpler to use, they're easier to use, they're easier to wrap your head around. Array lists are more confusing, for sure, but learning them and using them is totally worth it. So myArrayList.add 4, myArrayList.add 7, and then say I want to get those values out. Well, the index for this would be 0, and this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if I kept doing it. So what I want to do is system.out.println myArrayList.get, and then the index. So let's do 1. So ideally this should print out 7. And it prints out 7. Yay, I love when that happens. I love it when it works the way I think it does. So you basically have an array list, you added variables to it, and then you got them based on their index. Now, if you didn't know what the index was, but you wanted to get the last one in the array list, you would do myArrayList.size -1. Again, -1 because if you have 2 values, it's going to say, my length is 2, and then you're going to ask it, well, what's it indexed to? And it's going to say, I don't have an index 2. What are you talking about? It's because it starts counting at 0, just like practically everything else in computer science. But myArrayList.size -1, so if it returned 2, then it'd say the last index is 1. So this should also print out 7. But it does not print out 7. Why? Because we have to do myArrayList.get size -1, like that. And that will print out 7. So myArrayList.size -1 as an index gives us the last item in the index. The first item is always going to be 0 unless you do some weird convoluted thing with setting 0 equal to a null pointer to something or to an object that you somehow get the garbage collector to destroy, even though it shouldn't be doing that. But normally the first meaningful value in an array list is going to be at index 0. Same with arrays. There are weird exceptions, but you're not probably going to come across those. I have yet to come across one in an actual production kind of environment. Not to say I've done much production at all, but in actual, when I'm actually coding and, for my own, not just some weird convoluted test question, but actually real-time practice, I've never found anything like that. Never come across that. Don't think I've ever had in a test either, but there could be some weird exceptions with memory management. But basically, remember, 0 is going to be your first element. So you print out, the array list last item with this. This is kind of long. You could break this into multiple steps, saying int I equals myArrayList.get myArrayList.size -1, and then do system.out.println myArrayList.get 1. You could do it that way too. That would be perfectly. That would be easier to read, easier to make sense of, and would use more memory. So it's kind of a trade-off there. But again, memory management isn't too big of a deal with a single variable. It's once you start getting into ArrayLists and arrays where you have giant numbers of them that you have to start making sure you're doing the smartest thing for your program at that point. So that was about it for ArrayLists. I've talked for almost a solid 25 minutes without taking a breath. But sorry about that. Please, if you, one little quick housekeeping thing, I don't know if I mentioned this. I've been kind of debating on what to go into next, and so if people could kind of let me know what they want to see. You know, are you looking into more object-centric things? Do you want to know more about some of the data processing abilities of Java? Do you want to get into GUI elements? Kind of let me know what you want to see, and I'll kind of cater towards that. Not many things. We've covered most of the basics of Java, I feel. But if anyone notices something glaring that I forgot, like, hey, you know, what about system.println or something, you know, kind of really rudimentary like that, that you've noticed I've missed so far, I will be doing a couple more tutorials in the kind of beginner series, and then I'll be going into what I consider to be more of an intermediate series, because that's things like GUI elements, that's things like more advanced networking things, that's things like encryption, and actually not just saying, you know, let me find it here. Not just saying that, hey guys, this class does SHA 512 encryption, which is basically just taking something and turning it into something that can't be reversed. So you can make sure it's the same thing and make sure you don't have to store plain text passwords and stuff. We're actually going to be getting into the meat. What does this do? What's a digest? What are these kind of things? Why do I have to make it a byte array? Notice the array. No, why do I have to make a byte array of the digest? Why am I doing these things? What's a hex string? We'll be getting into all that kind of stuff in the what I consider to be more of an intermediate series. And then the advanced, I have no idea what we're going to do. That'll be interesting. Maybe I really don't want to do 3D graphics until I've learned those. I have not learned 3D graphics yet. That is one thing I've yet to learn in Java. So, but eventually we'll probably get into those. So anyway, though, just let me know what you want to see, what you're interested in, what you think would make a good next tutorial, next stepping stone. And if you don't know what it's called, just kind of describe it, you know, well, what's a good way to manage objects, and I'll say ArrayList, you know. So just kind of let me know what you want guys are looking for. If anyone doesn't know what a GUI is, it's a GUI, a graphical user interface. That's things like buttons, drop-down menus, tables, input and output with the user that doesn't involve a command line or involves a command line built into a GUI, which is kind of complex actually. Things like that. And then further down the road, we get into more advanced networking topics. I'll go into things like how to make a port scanner, may talk about how to make a white hat hacking tool, the SynFlood test. I don't know how if I want to go into that, but that might be cool. So just let me know what you want to see, and that's it for today. I will see you next time. And Mr. Willis or Williams, hope that answered your question. If that didn't, let me know. In tutorial 10 will be dedicated to, assuming I can understand what you're trying to say, dedicated to your object naming thing that you're talking about. So I will see you next time.